Hey all, so happy Thanksgiving, and I wanted to get in a really quick review of the 2015 brand new release, Spectre, produced by MGM, starring Daniel Craig. I mean, you guys have probably heard of this. This is the latest James Bond film in the franchise. Now, that being said, how does it hold up as a film, specifically a film in this franchise where you really have to sort of have a belief in it, and you have to sort of suspend your disbelief in order to buy into a lot of the James Bond stuff. When Ian Fleming wrote this series, he was not dealing with a postmodern world that had drones and the internet or cellular phones even. So a lot of his spy stuff was based on things that occurred in the 1930s and 40s during World War II, but also that occurred during the start of the Cold War. So that being said, Fleming wrote some amazing novels that have held up today, but when we're talking about James Bond, you have to look back at sort of the old school Bond that started with Sean Connery, and then you have to look at the Daniel Craig Bond, and you have to also realize this is Bond that's produced by the Broccoli family. There are other Bond films that were not under the Broccoli Eon Productions sort of label. I mean, you have the comedy farce Casino Royale, starring Peter Sellers, David Niven, Woody Allen, and several others, where it's very, very, very loosely based on that. Then there's actually a James Bond television movie that was produced, I believe, by CBS. I could be wrong. But that was way back, and that was actually a production of Casino Royale, and it had Peter Lorre, if I recall, as one of the characters. So, just taking all of that in consideration, this is to be Daniel Craig's last film, which is really hard to deal with because he really did revitalize the franchise after what sort of happened with Pierce Brosnan. To sort of catch you up, if you haven't seen the Pierce Brosnan films, a lot of them ended up being basically sort of recreations of the films that Roger Moore starred in. And like, for instance, Die Another Day involves diamonds being put on a satellite to then create a super laser that can, like, kill people, basically. And you have other stories like, Thunderball and Never Say Never Again, which was actually produced by Sean Connery as a solo project. And it just gets really interesting around that point because you actually have a lot of carryover between that and then Tomorrow Never Dies. GoldenEye was apparently one of the few that had a sort of original plot, but when you look at it, some of the story elements are kind of similar to that of Octopussy. That being said, there is no James Bond movie that I've ever watched that was produced by Broccoli or Eon that I absolutely hated and couldn't enjoy on some level. And actually, one of my favorites is On Her Majesty's Secret Service. There are things that are really bad about it, sure, but there are things that are terrible about the Roger Moore or the Sean Connery films, and yet people still absolutely love those, especially the Sean Connery ones. By contrast, you have the Timothy Dalton ones, which are actually, they have a lot more to do with the Daniel Craig incarnation when you go back and watch them. They have a lot of the realism, a lot of the getaway from comedy. I was recently rewatching some of the Roger Moore films, and I was amazed while watching them just how much they tried to really make it silly and goofy and everything. And Roger Moore's Bond usually ended up going up against some wealthy industrialist with an international corporation who was somehow going to destroy the world, or something along those lines. And it actually sort of started with Diamonds Are Forever, oddly enough, which was Sean Connery's last portrayal under the Eon Productions. And in that one, it was actually Blofeld who was like masquerading as Willard White, who was sort of an analog of Howard Hughes. He lived in a casino. He was very isolated. He was kind of a southern boy at heart, and he had a very diverse industry, including oil drilling, which is very much what Howard Hughes was all about. When you get into Moonraker, Drax is this space magnate who has pioneered things in satellites and spaceflight and everything. Zorin did computer chips and airships, and as well as oil. So with every one of them, it was sort of a, oh, what if Howard Hughes turned evil kind of thing. But after Roger Moore's era, when you got into the Timothy Dalton period, you dealt more with realistic characters who were like warlords or that kind of thing, and who weren't necessarily American or didn't necessarily operate out of America or have anything to do with the United States of America. And yet, despite that, the Timothy Dalton period, despite him actually being a pretty good Bond, I mean, he had a lot of the same qualities that we love about Daniel Craig's Bond, being a tough guy, being kind of ruggedly handsome, and being able to put on the charm and everything, and being able to have that dark side and believe that he's a killer. It's pretty awesome. By the time you get into Pierce Brosnan's period, it actually turns out that Brosnan was up for the role right around the time that Dalton was going to play the part, and they were all set to have Brosnan take over as Bond, when instead he got roped into a contract for Remington Steele, and he had to go on and play that role. And then when Remington Steele was over, he was like, okay, so can I please go back and play Bond now, And it's unfortunate that he couldn't have done both somehow, but unfortunately, the Brosnan period was really too much of a good thing in only a couple of movies, and you get really tired of some of his stuff in no time, because what happens is, like, okay, you've got GoldenEye, and I could stand GoldenEye a lot better if it weren't for, what was her name, Natalia Onatop. She was played by Famke Janssen, and as much as I enjoy Famke Janssen, the films that she's in, I do not like Famke Janssen as an actress. I don't think she does a very good job. I think it's just, oh, I'm here and I'm pretty kind of thing. She never really brings something that another person couldn't also bring. There's nothing uniquely that's part of her. So, by the time you get past that, you've got films like Die Another Day, and that was, I believe, the last one to feature Brosnan, and with good reason, because it really wasn't very good. It brought in North Korea because we forgot about the North Koreans as an enemy of NATO. And so, I mean, it just gets into a kind of a weird area. So, with the Moore period, you had a lot of sort of the same cast returning over and over again. You had the Moneypenny from the Sean Connery era. You had the you had one guy who represented Smersh, who was the Russian KGB type guy, basically, and he was a general. And then when you get into Octopussy, he's there, but he's kind of taken a back seat for this other bad guy who's like gone rogue and is working with Indians for some reason. I mean, Asian Indians, obviously. So yeah, it for some reason involves India, which is a region that was overlooked by some Bond films to a fault. But by the time you get into the Brosnan period, Tomorrow Never Dies, which is actually one of my favorites of the Bond films from that period, from the Brosnan period. My favorite is Tomorrow Never Dies, simply because it was based mostly on Rupert Murdoch, and it was an effective film. It was largely based on some of the same tropes as before, but you could actually enjoy the villain. He was a media mogul who was basically doing what some media moguls are known to do. They will actually guide the headlines and sort of steer what the public sees, so that then we act accordingly. They control the information that we get as the public, so that we accept a certain reality. So I mean, that's all you really have to look at on some level, is how well does the villain do? How established are they? How well will they work? Unfortunately, that one ended up being really cheesy with the way that it resolved. But you also had Michelle Yeoh, who was very much Bond's equal, not his subservient, not just some girl, but an actual fellow agent working for the Chinese. And she did a really great job, because Michelle Yeoh is a phenomenal actress, and she just did a great job with the part. And I was really glad to see her in that, because I was a fan of hers from back when she was in the Jackie Chan film Super Cop, which is not a dissimilar kind of film in terms of its genre. But besides all that, you get beyond the Pierce Brosnan period. You get beyond Halle Berry doing a bikini thing as Jinx in Die Another Day, which was horrible. And you get into the actual Daniel Craig period. You've got lesser-known actors coming in and playing parts. That's great. That's exactly what you need. You need unfamiliar faces, not people you've seen before. Because when you have, people like Jodan Baker appearing in your film, you've got a problem. And Jodan Baker reprised his role as Felix Leiter a few times. You also had Robbie Coltrane being brought in as a Russian mafia don. And that itself had its share of problems. So I have a real issue with anything getting too comfortable, and that was the nice thing about the Daniel Craig period. The only person that they had carry over was M. Was M, played by Judi Dench. And even then, after Skyfall, she was out. And she did a really good job actually carrying over, because she had the kind of gravitas that could carry over from being in the Pierce Brosnan cheeky wink and a smile kind of James Bond period, where it's all kind of campy and fun, and you've got John Cleese, a comedian, playing Q, which itself was kind of problematic, and he ended up only doing that for a couple of parts before they just called off that whole vein. And they go sort of back into things. So I found it really interesting that they went ahead. They had this interesting side to James Bond, starting with Casino Royale. They weren't afraid to go full-on intense. They had him parkouring around. They had the guy he was pursuing parkouring. They weren't afraid to show a really gruesome death. It wasn't just a bullet. They didn't do the same thing twice, if they could help it, which was a huge advantage for those of us in the audience, because as soon as you start to repeat yourself as a franchise like James Bond, where part of the thrill of the film is innovation and not just gizmos and gadgets, it really makes it a lot more enjoyable. Now, that being said, they did a really interesting job of taking the story from Casino Royale through its paces. You go from one place to another, and you're trying to solve this mystery just like James Bond does, trying to figure out who's behind what. You keep going and going until basically things are resolved, and you come back. And, that's the end of that case. Except that things weren't really over with Casino Royale, and they bothered to have it carry over into Quantum of Solace. Now, that being said, they did a wonderful job of staying true to the original Fleming material. They had Casino Royale being down, around the French Riviera and everything, and actually having this be, this actual story that Fleming intended. So it goes back to the original source material. It keeps it a lot purer. And as a story, one of the things I loved was the fact that they actually showed that his love interest for the film was vulnerable. When she sees people get killed, she's affected by it. You know, to me, a character is real if they show pain. You know, if a character who is, shot at or shot for that matter, doesn't bleed, I'm not believing it. Which is why Quantum of Solace was so heavy, because Bond is pushing himself harder and harder and harder, and at the start of the film, he looks like crap. I mean, he looks absolutely dead. His eyes are bloodshot, he's unshaven, he's not looking smooth or clean. He looks like he is just ready to die because he is hurting inside from his loss at the end of Casino Royale. That's pretty intense. That's pretty hard to see a character like James Bond suffering for. And that was one of the reasons why On Her Majesty's Secret Service was one of my favorite movies of the franchise, because it had one of the best endings. It's sad. Bond loses. They get his wife. When you think that they're going to go off and be happy together, no. Bond doesn't get to have that life. He doesn't get to be married, run off, have children, probably quit, and go do things. It was a dark ending. And for the Bond franchise, it was a very different ending from what you're used to. You're not accustomed to that. After all that you've been through, you expect a campy, happy little thing where it just kind of ends and James Bond, says some little one-liner, winks at the camera, and it's all over. But no. Bond gets married, and as they're driving off and getting ready to have kids and have a wonderful life together, she gets killed by a machine gun. That's it. So, that being said, Casino Royale and Quantum of Solace are great as sort of parts 1 and 2 of the new Bond franchise that you watch. Then you go into Skyfall. And Skyfall is an amazing experience of a film. Yes, you have the trope of and the cliche of the villain wants to be captured so that he can implement his plan. And he's, concocted this plan, and he's going to come in dressed as policeman. And it basically kind of copies some elements from the Dark Knight. And a lot of people have pointed that out. Or, for that matter, from the Avengers. Almost the exact same plot there, where the villain wants to be captured, and by being captured, they're able to almost end it. But what I love about Skyfall is that you go all around. You go to this beautiful, casino somewhere in Southeast Asia, and you get all of this wonderful exposure to everything, and you don't think that the story is at all linked to everything. It seems like an isolated adventure. You're really enjoying the villain. The villain loves being evil. He is deliciously evil. He just relishes it. He doesn't mind killing people, and if they can suffer before they die, that makes him just thrilled. He does things by controlling information, not unlike in not The World Is Not Enough. Tomorrow Never Dies. If I said The World Is Not Enough in other earlier in this, I meant Tomorrow Never Dies. I'm sorry. Anyway, so you have this guy who has all these servers on this isolated little ghost island that used to be a mine, and he controls information and he hacks systems from around the world so that he can get money and resources and hire guys to be his goons and everything. He is the villain from Under Siege 2 Dark Territory. Totally different franchise, but still. Point is, he uses his his power and money effectively. And what gets me, though, about all of that is that it isn't just over at the climax when M is at the hearing and they're all set to shut down MI6 if M screws up and then there's an attack. It isn't over there. Bond doesn't capture the bad guy there or kill him. No, it has to go back to this really old place at Skyfall, this estate owned by the Bond family. I love that. I love that it ends there at this really remote, isolated place that doesn't just have everything. So much of Skyfall is about just going back to basics. And then Ralph Fiennes steps in as M, and he's phenomenal in the role. At this point, he was about to do Grand Budapest Hotel, and he had some little starring roles on as a side character on the sitcom Rev, which is about a vicar in the Anglican Church in a poor part of London. Anyway, so if you haven't checked out Rev, do so, and especially check out Ralph Fiennes in his part. He's really cool in it. But Skyfall is great because it really brings about the reboot of the franchise. You've got M steps down, and she ends up dying after that, apparently. You actually find this out in this new film. Now we're going to get into the spoilers for the new film, finally. So you've got Daniel Craig as James Bond, of course. And he starts out in Mexico on Dia de los Muertos, and he goes after a target. And, he ends up accidentally bringing down this building, and he's chasing after this one guy in a white suit who is his target. But they open up with a really pretty well done one-take shot. It's a continuous shot from start to a certain point. And they try to keep the continuous shot in real time as best as they possibly can. Now, that being said, one-take shots are kind of an artistic choice. They're very hard to do, and frankly, I've found them to be a little bit painful in some cases because it tends to be more the director's ego and a matter of contrivance. In this instance, though, for the opening shot, it's not an unintegral thing for the story. There's no reason why it can't be done in one take. Or one continuous shot, rather. And the other nice thing is that if there are edit marks, you don't notice it as much. You're sort of following along, and they make it so that it's compartmentalized into sort of cleaner edit marks than you have in some films where they try and do the continuous shot. Even in the film Rope, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, some of the cuts are a little bit too jumpy. So that being said, pay attention for that. Look for the continuous shot. It is a really fun part of the film. Bond goes up to this hotel room with this beautiful woman, and he says he'll be right back. He steps out on the balcony, and then he walks along the ledge, and he continues walking all the way from the balcony of the hotel room to this one ledge that's opposite where his target and his guys are meeting. Now, some would see that as a bit of a convenience, but this is James Bond, and he's doing this. He met this woman and everything who lives in this hotel room specifically so that he could probably do this. Okay? So, this is not entirely un-Bond or too much of a convenience. I could totally see Bond doing this. This is part of his tactics, part of his training as a spy. Anyway, so he's chasing this guy through the parades and festivities of Dia de los Muertos, and the guy calls for a helicopter, which flies over, clears an area where the guy gets on board, and Bond jumps on the helicopter. And right away, if you love air vehicle stunts, this is your film. There are 3 helicopter scenes, and one with an old turboprop plane. And it's actually really enjoyable. So, basically, Bond gets a special ring that has the Spectre logo on it, the Spectre symbol, and he goes to Italy where he meets a beautiful widow of the guy that he just killed, and they have a lovely little roll in the hay, and then he goes off to the meeting that she knows where it's at. So that's one of the reasons why he seduces her. He goes to the meeting and learns a whole bunch of stuff, because this is a Spectre meeting, so this is some intense stuff. This is dangerous. He could be made, he could be killed at any moment. Scary stuff. But he sort of gets through it, right? He gets into the meeting, and he finds out some clues about where to go and everything, and finally he ends up going. He ends up getting caught. First off, Blofeld makes him and spots him, and it turns out that Blofeld was once Franz Oberhauser, who was a childhood friend of James's. So you've got sort of a hush aspect to it if you follow Batman. So they were childhood friends. They grew up together, but then Oberhauser's father died, and in a terrible accident, supposedly with Franz Oberhauser. But it turns out that there's a whole other issue that comes up with it later. Basically, let's just call him Blofeld for convenience sake. Blofeld was jealous of James kind of getting favoritism, so he kills his own father and sort of plots to have James lose loved ones, starting with Casino Royale. But it continues from there, because every character that he's met along the way that he's killed, Blofeld has made sure to kill someone in his life, like Judi Dench's M, or someone else that he loves, basically, or someone that he cares about or is responsible for. So it gets to be really interesting there. Bond gets out of there in this really amazing car chase scene through Rome. It's a really good car chase. I don't want to spoil anything for you. There's a little bit of comedy in it, but that's about it. And it's really integral comedy, unlike some comedy bits that you saw in some of the films where it's just like, oh, well, let's just stick some comedy in here. Why not, right? So Bond ends up getting to Austria. Now, I'll stop there for a moment because I have to go back and explain a couple things. First off, Bond is equipped with some tracking plot device called Smart Blood, and it's basically nanites in his bloodstream that help MI6 track him. Q injected it, and there's also a watch that Q gave him that he was like, well, does the watch do anything? And Q basically gives him a clue that the alarm is going to do something, and it'll be really intense. And I don't know how one is supposed to conclude from the phrase "the alarm is rather loud" to then conclude that, oh, it's explosive, because I would think it had a sonic detonating device that just like shattered glass or whatever. That would be my best guess, but apparently, yeah, it's explosive. And also, MI6 is being integrated into MI5 because the head of MI5 has been working for a long time. The head of MI5, whose name is C, he's played by Moriarty from Sherlock. The Cumberbatch Martin Freeman Sherlock? Yes. He's played by Moriarty. Of course he's going to be evil. Anyone who watches Sherlock is going to know, oh, there's your bad guy. So, anyway, you get a heads up right away. Okay, he's the bad guy because he's going to be a bad guy because he's Moriarty. He can't not be evil. All the Sherlock fans are going ah at this point, and they kind of know what's coming up. So, all right, moving on from there, the new head of MI5 wants to replace the 00 agents with drones and probes on the internet and security cameras and surveillance and everything like that. And this plays into things a little bit later. But back to Austria. There he finds Mr. White from Quantum of Solace and the end of Casino Royale. So we're really harkening back. So he finds out that White has been poisoned, basically, with a radioactive substance that is actually really used in real life. It's been used by the Russians to kill political opponents with cancer, basically. It's a low-level radioactive substance that over time will give you various levels of cancer that will kill you. Anyway, so he's been given cancer and he's going to die. There's nothing that can be done about it. So Bond says, basically the topic of White's daughter is brought up. Her name is Madeline Swan. So he ends up promising that he'll keep Dr. Swan safe. And then White kills himself because he's going to die painfully of cancer if he doesn't. So he makes the promise. So he ends up finding Dr. Swan, who is a therapist, up in the Austrian Alps at a very isolated center, which makes one wonder why they would have a therapy center up in the Alps like that. It's just kind of weird. So, all that being said, she ends up getting captured by Spectre, and they're going to take her off and everything because she knows too much. So that ends up leading to this intense chase where Bond is flying a turboprop plane and just basically uses it for all it's worth to take out the bad guys. And one of the actually really cool things is that the main baddie that he's going up against is basically an analog of Jaws. He is quiet. He is more than happy to use his big brute strength to kill, and he just doesn't say a word. He's mysterious. You don't know quite who he is. So that's pretty terrifying. So that aside, you have them then going to this hotel that Mr. White clues James in on, called L'Americain, and it's in Tangier. And you end up having this interesting mystery going on where James is trying to find some kind of clue from there in this room that White and his wife would go to every year because they went there on their honeymoon, and they took Madeline along when she was born. So it ends up becoming this huge mystery of, okay, well, what are we looking for? And James ends up finding a secret room with all the information and everything that he's looking for because a mouse or a rat, I think it's a rat actually, ends up crawling through a mouse hole into a hidden room. And from there they find some coordinates that they grab a train out to the middle of apparently nowhere. Well, along the way we run into our silent, big scary goon guy, and we actually don't know what happens to him in the end. We assume he's dead, but we can't really assume that. He gets a rope tied around his neck and gets pulled out, basically, as these beer kegs fall off the cargo compartment of the train. And the only words that he says in the entire movie is just shit, as he's pulled off. Although, in that amount of time, he could actually loosen the rope a little bit, and then it would just whip off of him a little bit. But whatever. So, yeah, we don't know what happens to him, but we assume he's dead. He's not necessarily dead, though. At any rate, they get off the train and are greeted mysteriously by a Rolls Royce at this old, mysterious, rundown train station that's in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing there, and it's clearly from like a bygone century, basically. So they got to the middle of nowhere, and Q and Moneypenny have been able to see from the satellite footage that there actually is a facility there in the middle of a crater. But M points out that any information they find will just help C and his people to track James down, since James, at this point and from the beginning of the film, is operating without the provision of MI6. Okay? Much like in part of Casino Royale or Quantum of Solace, he's actually off the records. He's not acting on accord of MI6. So he and Dr. Swan go to this crater, and at this point they have fallen in love after being attacked by a big scary guy. So we get this really interesting thing of it's this isolated facility. And for some reason there's a meteor there. They don't really explain why there's a meteor involved in it, but there's a meteor involved. And it's just the meteor that created that crater. And it's the oldest meteor that's ever been found. So that's kind of interesting, but it really has nothing to do with anything. And it turns out, first off, we meet Blofeld. And Blofeld, played by Christoph Waltz, is in my opinion, he's a little bit too cheerful to be an effective villain. Yeah, he relishes the evil, but he relishes it just a little bit too much, almost to the point of camp. So I could have done kind of with less of the smiling and, hey, here I am, I'm that guy. So anyway, it's revealed that basically MI5 and Moriarty are working for him. No kidding, right? I mean, you could see that coming a mile away. So then the question comes of, okay, well, what are they going to do about it? Well, unfortunately, they are right in the clutches of Blofeld. So he straps James to a chair and starts basically taking this little tiny needle-sized drill and just drilling into James's head. And the idea is that he's like taking out portions of James's brain that are going to cause him to suffer more. And the worst part is that it actually doesn't even work. Like the first drill is meant to like just cause him to, I don't know, have some problem. I don't even remember exactly what it was, but I remember he makes this big deal about how, oh, and when I drill in here, it's going to cause you to never be able to recognize faces. And then what happens? But James, he gets the drill shoved in and pulled out, and then he's still able to recognize faces. He's still able to recognize faces just fine. So Blofeld, you suck. You don't get it right, man. You think you're being all smart by slowly torturing him with a little needle being shoved into him and drilling away at parts of his brain that are supposedly, going to cause him like immense suffering. He can still recognize faces. You suck. Blofeld sucks. So, anyway, so Bond uses the exploding watch. No surprise there. Why else would you have an exploding watch? But now he can't tell what time it is. Anyway, except if he looks at his phone. Well, anyway, so Blofeld ends up getting away. Bond uses a chopper. He gets through the chopper, and he takes Dr. Swan back to London to a safe house where he encounters M and Q and all the other letters, as well as Moneypenny. And they go off to try and take out the MI5 intelligence network that's going to give Spectre the power to track down anyone. And you've seen this plot before in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, right? It's basically the same plot. Blofeld is Robert Redford. I mean, like, almost literally. So, anyway, M takes out C by, no, quite by accident, actually. Meanwhile, Q is able to shut down the intelligence network that's going to cause all this ability for Spectre to just kill anyone they want and keep track of the intelligence operations. Basically, the main element here is that it's going to stop intelligence operations from being effective, because they're going to know where the agents are. They're going to know what they think is going on, and if they're about to move in on operations, so that then they can commit any terror act that they want. So this is actually a pretty scary proposition, and it's a pretty effective plot point, really. It's kind of doing what they did in Tomorrow Never Dies. It's kind of doing what they did in Skyfall, but to the nth degree, and working within the system. So that's a pretty cool plot point, actually. Meanwhile, we're taking a look at the old MI5 building, old MI5, MI6 building. And because as they're trying to go and confront C and Blofeld and everything, James is captured by members of Spectre and taken off to the old MI5 building, and he goes on kind of a little chase. And you've got a Joker-esque kind of interplay here. There's arrows pointing around the building. The entire building is wired with high explosive. And you don't quite know why. And he's been led down into the bowels of the building, and he's clearly about to blow it up because it's all been wired for demolition anyway. This is introduced earlier as a plot point as well. And basically he's like, I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to blow up the building with you in it. You can escape, or you can go find Dr. Swan. So it's the old go and rescue the girl ploy. Well, anyway, I've already mentioned that M stops C and that Q disables the network, which is about to go online at midnight, because of course midnight. And the building does end up, the old MI building does end up getting blown up. But here's the other thing about that. Bond ends up finding Dr. Swan in M's old office, in a closet, basically. But here's the other thing about it. There is a giant hole going right down through the center of the building. We're allowed to see it as Bond enters the room, or enters the building. He even looks up at it. And there's a giant net above the floor, like a good 10 feet above the floor. There's this giant net for catching debris as it falls. And since there's this giant hole, and they had people wiring the thing to be ready to blow up, you know, they wanted that as a safety precaution, of course. So you already have a plot device that there's this giant hole with a net at the bottom that if you're at the top, you can jump down through. Well, Blofeld apparently didn't take this into account and think, gee, maybe I should get rid of this net over this giant hole that goes from the top of the building where I'm hiding the girl. And, I can't believe that Blofeld would be that stupid. Seriously, Blofeld, you suck! Okay, I don't normally like doing angry reviews, but this is my angry review. Blofeld sucks in this movie. So, we keep going. And Blofeld gets away. He's in a chopper. Because of course he's in a helicopter. We've already had 2 scenes with helicopters. Why not have one more, right? And we've already been introduced to the idea that there's this underwater, this sort of just on the surface of the water dock that is under the old MI building, right? And Bond finds this boat down there. And of course, there's a boat down there because the building's about to be blown up. Why wouldn't you have a perfectly usable boat down in the hidden dock under the building? Ugh. Okay. So Bond takes the girl and Dr. Swan, who is a really interesting and attractive woman. I do have to admit. Of the Bond babes, she is really up there for one of my favorites. She's played by Léa Seydoux. and she's kind of played as multinational, never one particular nationality. Anyway, so she and he go off in the boat down the river, and he shoots at the helicopter until it blows up and lands on one of the bridges that goes across the Thames River. Or should I say the River Thames? Either way, point being, the thing gets blown up, and Blofeld is able to just get out. I mean, he's already nearly died in the explosion at the crater compound with the meteor in it. I mean, that thing blew up. It was a Michael Bay level of explosion, right? Only there was way more smoke than in a typical Michael Bay explosion. So, we keep going, right? He gets out of the plane. Now, at this point, I would like to point out that Blofeld has already died once. Now he's gotten out of death another time. So, Blofeld, you only live twice. So, count yourself lucky you got this third time. And he's crawling away because his legs are, broken or something. And he just cannot get off that bridge. He's crawling away by inches. The police are already there on the scene. They're blocking off the bridge. M is right there. He is ready to make an arrest on Blofeld. Because Bond has told him everything. And Bond is at the other end of the bridge. They pull up the boat, and Bond climbs up the stairs to the bridge, and he is ready to take out Blofeld and just end this. And even Blofeld is like, go ahead, end it. Get in here. Go ahead. Kill me. I want you to. And anyway, so... but Bond doesn't. Because one of the things that Dr. Swan says to him, Madeline, she says, I can't be a part of this, and I can't expect you to change. And it's really interesting because James, he throws down his gun. He unloads it. He takes out the cartridge, takes out the bullet that's in the chamber, and he throws his gun away and walks away and leaves M to arrest Blofeld. He's got Blofeld. Blofeld isn't going to be doing anything. He's left things safer. And he's got his beautiful doctor girlfriend person. No joke intended for the Venture Brothers fans. Right? So he's got his beautiful doctor girlfriend now, and he can just go off somewhere. He doesn't have to keep this up at this point. He's taken out the head of Spectre. The head of Spectre is now caught. So he does. He stops by Q to get his old Aston Martin, and that's it. He drives off, and that's the end of the Daniel Craig James Bond. I know, right? It's a little bit anticlimactic towards the end, but it's a pretty good going out for the James Bond franchise for this particular Bond. He doesn't want to play the part anymore. He wants to go do other things. And he wants to turn it over to someone else to play the part, which I'm all good with. It's a pretty good resolution to the story. You feel kind of satisfied for the ending. The dialogue is pretty well written. There's only one real trope involved in this, and that's just where after they take out the big quiet goon, Madeline looks at him and goes, well, now what do we do? And they end up back in the train cabin, and they're clearly, about to have sex. And it's like, okay, we have seen no arc for them falling in love. So this is not a normal, healthy relationship. But then again, when you actually look at who these people are, they are not normal, healthy people. They have not had normal lives or childhoods or anything like that. So you kind of can just accept it. Anyway, Spectre is a pretty good film. I enjoyed it. Blofeld as a villain generally sucks, unfortunately. I mean, I hate to say that, because Blofeld is supposed to be the villain, and you keep thinking, oh, Blofeld, yeah, it's going to be really awesome, it's going to be intense, right? It's going to be something, right? No, it's not. It's just, yeah. It's not that terribly interesting. do watch Monica Bellucci's performance. She is fantastic in it. Like I said, Lea Seydoux is really good in it. Christopher Waltz is just not a very good Blofeld. They give him all the chances to really have some of the gravitas in his role, but he just doesn't live up to the Donald Pleasance legacy. I mean, heck, Telly Savalas was Blofeld in one film, and he did a better job at being Blofeld. At least he didn't suck quite as much as this Blofeld does. He wasn't... And Telly Savalas smiled as Blofeld. He was his charming self and everything. But he wasn't this level, where he was just really camping it up. Okay, so that wraps this up. Thanks for watching, guys. I know this was a long review, and I'm sorry about all the spoilers, but please, go ahead, check out the film, see it in theaters. It's worth it. It's an enjoyable movie, especially if it's your Thanksgiving or your Christmas time coming up. Go ahead and check it out. If you have the chance to watch it on pay-per-view or DVD or on streaming, go ahead and check it out. It's not that terrible a movie. Just be ready for the fact that Blofeld as a villain kind of sucks. He is not this really amazing villain that you kind of expect him to be, like you see in You Only Live Twice or in several other Bond films. You expect him to be a lot better. Blofeld kind of sucks. He's not up to the measure of some of the other villains that you see. So, but if you think Blofeld was awesome, please leave a constructive and respectful comment in the comments section below. I would love to hear from you. I love good feedback from people. And yeah, check it out. Spectre, it's in theaters now. Bye-bye.